Hi there, thank you for joining me today. My name is Stephanie Goldsmith and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make a face mask. It's really actually quite simple and you don't need a lot of materials to do this. What you do need is a little bit of scrap cotton, but if you don't have that around either, maybe it's time to purge an old cotton shirt out of your closet and upcycle this project as well. You will need some 1/4-inch elastic, approximately 24 to 26 inches depending on the size of your head. You will want a pair of scissors or shears, and to make things easier, a safety pin, but again you could feed your elastic through without. Of course you do need my free downloadable printable pattern, so go ahead and do that and check your scaling by the size of the box at the bottom to make sure you have an accurate size from your printer. I have already gone and cut out my pattern. It comes in 4 different sizes. Today I'm going to sew a man's size face mask. So grab your supplies, get ready, and let's get started. Okay, so now you're going to pin your pattern piece onto your fabric like so. Today I'm making a camo face mask for my husband. And then you're also going to want to cut it out of a lining. So it does say cut 2 out of fabric, cut 2 out of lining. You don't have to cut it out twice. What I've done is folded my fabric in half, so I automatically will get the 2 when I cut it out. You are going to do the same to your lining. I'm using a scrap of a mock-up that I made from a previous pattern for my lining. You don't really see your lining fabric. As you can see on this example, for my son, I have Star Wars on the top. That's my main fabric, and on the inside lining is just black. So again, I understand that a lot of people don't have fabric hanging around their house or can't go out and get fabric at the moment. So be creative. Go through your closets, find some scrap pieces. It doesn't use up a whole lot. Like I said, I am using up this mock-up of a skirt pattern that I tested earlier. You should now have 2 of your main fabric and 2 of your lining fabric cut out. So we're ready to sew. Our first step is going to be pinning our main fabric with right sides together. So that means you're going to take these apart, you're going to actually reverse them because we don't want to be staring at our good side when we sew. And you are going to start to pin the curved side of your mask. So I've now pinned both my curved edges with my 2 main fabrics together and my 2 lining fabrics together. This pattern includes 5/8 seam allowance. If you're not sure what that is, it's also 1.5 centimeters, and there is a guide on your machine, which I will show you. So today I am going to sew with a Janome sewing machine. I have a how to thread your Janome sewing machine video as well. I highly recommend you watching that. Even if you don't have a Janome sewing machine, it will ensure that your sewing machine is threaded correctly before you begin. That will eliminate a lot of frustration when sewing these masks. I'm all ready to go. My machine is threaded, and I wanted to point out what 5/8 of a seam allowance is. That's our standard seam allowance. So it's this little line on your throat plate that stands for 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch. If your sewing machine does not have these guides, you can simply just measure from your needle over with a ruler to where 1.5 centimeters is. You should have a little line, perhaps not actually accurately marked, but use that or even tape a piece of tape there and you will be good to go. So I'm going to start by putting in my main fabric against my 5/8 seam allowance. I'm going to lower my foot and I'm going to take out my pins as I sew. And so I'm going to take a couple stitches forward and a couple stitches back. You have a reverse button. You probably will see this symbol on your machine. It might not look exactly like this lever. It might be a touch button, but that's your reverse lever. It reinforces the beginning and the end of all your seams. So I'm going to take a couple stitches forward. 3 to 5 is usually a good sufficient amount. And then I'm going to hold my lever so it can go back. And now I'm just going to practice and keep trying to follow that 15 line and 5/8 and twirl my fabric, stopping to take out my pins as I go. When you reach the end, you're going to do another little back stitch, 3 to 5 stitches. And do not sew off your fabric. Turn your hand wheel so that your needle goes up in the highest position. So I am turning my hand wheel here towards me so that my needle is in the highest position. I know that when my take-up lever is up here. And now I can lift my foot out, pull out my fabric, and I can even use that little cut. So there you have it. You've sewn the curved edges of your outside fabric. Now go ahead and do the same to your lining. Now that we've sewn our curved edges of both our outside and our lining fabric, we're going to notch our convex curve. So what that means is, without putting your tips of your shears past your stitching line like that, you're going to just put them up to but not through, and you're going to take out little tiny triangles. This helps to allow your curve to lay smoother while you are top stitching. And because when it flips around to the good side, all that extra fabric gets tucked together. And so cutting out little notches and triangles allows your fabric to collapse, your seam allowance, to collapse on itself. And it'll allow your curve to sit a lot nicer, less bulk. Once you've notched both of those curved edges, you can see I've notched every about 1/2 inch or so along that edge. We're going to take a tailor's ham. If you don't have one of these, you don't need it. It just makes life easier when you're pressing a curve. So I'm going to open up my curved seam. I'm going to put it around my ham like this. And I'm going to press my seam allowance facing one side. It doesn't matter which side it goes. We're just pushing it to one edge to make that seam lay nice and flat. So once you put it around your ham, you can go ahead and start to press that nice and smooth. You're going to repeat this with your lining as well. Now that you've pressed the curved part of your seam and your seam allowance is facing one way, you're going to top stitch on that side that you pressed the seam allowance close to the edge of your seam so that your seam will lay flat while you wear your mask. I'm going to follow the inside edge of my little paddle of my foot. So if you can see that, I'm just following that inside little edge with the edge of my seam. Anything that gets you a nice little edge stitch will be good. Again, I'm going to take a couple stitches forward, a couple stitches back, and then as I go through my curve seam, I'm just kind of sewing into the curve. This is probably your most challenging part of your whole mask. So you're going to keep on sewing and just opening up a little new spot that's flat along your mask. If you feel like it might pucker or bump, you can leave your needle down, lift up your foot, and then smooth it out, put your foot back down again. So now I have edge stitched down the whole entire curved seam on both my lining and my outside. Now it is time to put them together. Now that you have edge stitched both your outside mask and your lining mask, you're going to place your outside mask good side up, and then you're going to take your lining mask and place it good side down, right on top of each other, so that you can see your seam allowance on this side, and you can also see your seam allowance on the other side. So we have good sides touching. We're going to pin along the two long sides, along the top and along the bottom. We're not pinning along our short ends because we need to leave those open so we can flip our mask right side out. I recommend that you pin your intersecting seams first, so I'm just lining up those at the very top and putting a pin in there so I know those seams match. And then I would flip it around and do the same to the bottom side so that the bottom seams match as well. So let's go ahead and pin our two long sides. Okay, so we've pinned our long sides of our mask with right sides together. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and following your 5/8 or 1.5 centimeter guide, you're going to sew along the two long pinned sides. Awesome, so we have sewn our 2 long sides. Before we flip it right side out, there's a little bit of a concave curve here and right here. So I like to do a few little clips along that curve. Just like notching, my scissors don't go past my stitching line. I keep my shears just up to my stitching line, and every 1/2 inch I'm making just slits. I'm not taking out triangles as it's a concave curve, and this will just allow some flexibility in that curved seam around the face so it doesn't feel like it's pulling or not laying right when you flip it. So I'm going ahead and doing this to my other curve on this side, and then I can flip it right side out. My mask is flipped right side out. I'm now going to press the edges, the 2 long edges we just sewed. So I'm going to make sure that they are laying nice and flat, and with my iron I'm just going to press all the way along these long edges so that it lays nice and smooth. We're going to go edge stitch after, just like we did along our curved seam. So go ahead and press your 2 long edges. Pressing just gives your mask a much neater appearance, and it also makes it easier to sew because you have a creased edge to follow for your edge stitching. We are going to go to the sewing machine and follow 1/4 inch or 2/8 of an inch on your throat plate of your sewing machine, and that will give you a nice stitch really close to the nice finished edge that we just finished pressing. So again, for edge stitching, I mentioned it's 1/4 inch, so it's between the 1/8 and the 3/8 on your throat plate. It's this ticky here. Or if you liked following that inside edge of the paddle of your presser foot, that is 1/4 inch as well. So you're going to drop your foot and you're going to sew along both long sides of your mask. Okay, great job. So we have edge stitch, we're almost there. We still have our 2 raw edges along the side. So we have to flip those into towards the bad side of your mask to form what's called a casing. This is what is going to be used as a tunnel to feed your elastic through on your mask. So you're going to take a ruler or a tape measure or whatever you have at your house. I have a seam gauge and I put it to 1 inch. You're going to turn in 1 inch towards the inside of your mask and just pin it in place. After you've pinned it, go ahead again and take it to the iron and give it a nice crease along this 1 inch mark. So I just ironed my casing and really gave it a nice crease along that 1 inch line. And so now I'm going to open it up. It's still creased nicely around the 1 inch, but I'm going to turn in my raw edge by 1/4 inch. The reason we're doing that is if you simply just sewed it down in place here, your raw edge would still show on the inside of your mask, and we don't want that. So you're just going to tuck under just a tiny bit, like I said, 1/4 inch, using your iron, giving this a really nice press as well. Watch those fingers. And so I only really had to measure once. I measured my 1 inch because now this is going to fold nicely to the inside again along my existing crease that I had pressed before. And I'll just iron it one more time, give it a little steam so that it really sits nicely. Now you can see that we have a nice finished folded edge along that inside casing that we are going to go ahead and stitch really close to that fold so that we have given ourselves a tunnel to feed our elastic through. We are now ready to insert the elastic. You have just finished edge stitching close to that edge, and what you have now is a tunnel to feed your elastic through. I have cut a piece of 1/4 inch elastic to be 26 inches long, and I've attached a safety pin to the end. If you don't have a safety pin, you can just feed it through. It's not a long casing. It actually works pretty good. If you do have a safety pin, it does make your life a little bit easier. If you're making a kid size mask, I think 24 inch elastic is probably good. Again, it all depends on your head circumference, and so that is easily adjusted at the end. So I'm going to take my safety pin now and put it into the bottom of my mask, and using my safety pin, I'm going to just sort of thread it through the casing until it peeks out this side. I'm going to pull my elastic. I'm going to leave a tail down here. But now I'm going to loop my elastic back around through the top of the other side and work my way top to the bottom this time. So I'm going to feed this through. And then at the very bottom, I've kind of created two circles. One going from bottom up, around, top down. And now I'm going to join my elastics together at the bottom. So I'm going to take my safety pin off. And I'm going to overlap my elastic like this, about by 1 inch. I don't put them end to end, as that will create a little bulk in your casing. I overlap them one on top of the other like this. And I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and kind of go forwards, backwards, forwards a few times right down the middle to secure it. This part won't show. We will shuffle it so it's hiding in our casing somewhere over here. I've sewn my elastic together. If you overlapped yours a little larger and you have longer tails, you could trim these up on both sides just by a little bit to reduce the bulk of your elastic. Once that's finished, just sort of twirl your elastic around until you have it hiding in the casing, and ta-da, you have finished your face mask. It is ready to be worn. I just wanted to thank you for watching my tutorial on how to create a face mask. Your face mask will be worn with one elastic above your ear wrapping around the back of your head, and the other elastic below your ear wrapping around your neck. I hope that everybody and their families are staying home, staying healthy, and hopefully picking up a new hobby while they're doing so and sewing some face masks. I challenge you to keep going and make some for your local seniors home and to your local airport. Thank you and all the best.